What's up, YouTube? Wraithyn here. I'm back. This time we are continuing our how to build series. We're going to be diving into the solo lane. I'm doing this live on my Twitch channel tonight. We're going to be talking about build theory in the solo lane and why you're building what you're building when you're building it. I think a lot of times people get into this mode where they see an item with a certain stat that they want on it, and so they just gravitate towards it. You see a lot of solo laners with things like Jotuns or Trans or things like that, and it's just you end up having these like weird builds that don't really do anything late game, and maybe they're good for laning, but when they start rotating, do what they're supposed to, it doesn't work out very well. So we're gonna dive in, talk about build theory in the solo lane and why you should build what you build. We'll do it live. So the first thing, whenever you guys are doing builds, is you need to think about, what is my god good at doing? We're not going to look at the build for Amaterasu. We're going to look at the kit for Amaterasu, right? So let's look at these abilities, okay? So we've got things like healing in the kit. We've got things like power in the kit. We've got a passive which increases the amount of damage taken by 10% after 3 auto attacks. And you can stack it up to 3 times, right? We have damage mitigation in the kit. We've got damage in the kit, but with 60% physical power scaling. And then full charge damage obviously is a lot more. But we have a lot of base damage here in the kit. Same thing with the 3, a lot of base damage, 300 at max rank. And then the ult, the same thing. Damage per strike is 240, hitting 3 times, right? So when we look at how we're gonna build Amaterasu, we're gonna say, we're gonna cut that part out. When we look at building someone like Amaterasu or Shock or anybody like that, you want to look at their abilities first, and then that's going to dictate how you play into the rest of the build. Starting off, when we get into the God Builder, it's always about your starter item, right? Looking at Amaterasu, the power from her kit doesn't really come from anything else but her passive and her 1, right? That's her big strength, is that she's going to get a lot of free power for both her and her team. She's got a ton of base damage on her abilities. She doesn't really have great scaling. So the key to Amaterasu is auto attacking the absolute hell out of everybody around you to try and proc that passive, whether it's in lane, whether it's in team fights, right? You want to get in the back and you want to make everybody take more damage. We'll get into the starter items. I think there's probably, at the time of recording this, there's probably 3 starter items you could go that make sense. The first one's Warrior's Axe. This is just kind of a good go-to no matter what god you're playing. Is it the best? No. Is it the worst? No. I think you could get a lot of value out of this, especially since in these team fights you're going to be speeding around, you're going to be hitting multiple enemies. You can get this proc over and over and over again. I think this is going to be something that you could probably pick this up and it really wouldn't matter whether or not you did that. The second one would be Death Toll. I think if you really think about the way that Ama plays, Death Toll makes a lot of sense because you're going for quick auto attacks to proc her passive. Death Toll does very well if you're in auto attack builds, and Death Embrace especially heals 2% of your health and mana, right? So if we're going into a auto attack centric health build, Death Embrace is going to have a lot of value later in the game. And then the last one I think you could probably go pretty safely is Warding Sigil. The reason for that is because Sigil of the Old Guard is going to decrease the damage that you take by up to 12%. When you remember, we looked at the abilities of Amaterasu when we started. If you add that to the self-damage mitigation with just the 2 activated and Sigil of the Old Guard activated, you can get up to 27% self-damage mitigation with just that 1 item and the passive on the 2. So when we go for starters, there's a lot that you can do here. Sigil and Warrior's Axe are probably a little bit more late game focused. The early game, it's okay with the flat damage reduction and the physical and magical protections, but for my money, especially since we're going to be going into a more auto attack centric build, I think that Death Toll early is probably your best bet, just because you can sit there and box. You could make an argument for Mannequin here too, but I don't think it's really worth it. The second thing is your start. So now we selected our first item. Now we have to say to ourselves, okay, what are we going to get the absolute most value out of when we start this game? Amaterasu has a lot of sustain in her kit. She's able to box very well. She does a lot of damage. For me, because I know we're going to be going into a Berserker shield, either round shield and then 2 health and 2 multi potions, because I'm going to back and I'm going to want to get full boots, or If you really want to be safe, what you could do is nix all of this and just start with the Death Toll, the Chalice, and 4 multi-potions. What this is going to do is, if you read here, so this is about 500 gold here, 650 here. That means that we're going to have a pretty significant amount of gold just at level 1 when we're going out to the waves, meaning that you're going to back really quickly for boots. So basically what that means is that you're going to get your big power spike, right? Because we talked about Amaterasu doing well with auto attacks. You're going to get your big power spike, which is boots, much quicker than the enemy player if they go something like a round shield. If there were 2 Amas going up against each other, these 10 physical power and 5 physical protections is not going to be able to square up well if you've got full boots and they don't, because we're going to be going into Ninja Tabby. Again, what we're looking to do here is proc that passive as many times as we possibly can. So 20 physical power, 25% attack speed, 18% movement speed, and a little bit of mana, which doesn't really matter in the solo lane, and you're going to be absolutely swinging. As soon as you clear those minions and you engage on whoever's in the lane with you, they start taking more damage. If they hit you back, they start taking more damage from your minions. Getting your passive online, remember we talked about it earlier, getting your passive online with Ninja Tabby is going to make a whole lot of sense. So now we start getting into where you're going to start diverging your build depending on what you're going up against. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to understand who's in lane with us right now. So if I've got a magical damage dealer, somebody like, let's just call it, let's say a Jormungandr. He's the one who's beating my cheeks, and maybe they have a magical jungler you're really worried about. Well, maybe I need to build magic defense first. The one thing that a lot of solo laners do incorrectly is they go heavy onto the defense type that they need against what's in lane against them, right? So somebody will buy Ninja Tabby, Berserkers, Mystic Mail, Void Shield. They got all this physical defense because they're up against the Sun Wukong. And then they rotate into the mid lane and they get absolutely exploded by Asilla, right? So we need to be thinking in our heads here a little bit. Okay, what is my role as this game goes on? So let's just say we're up against a physical damage dealer. Obviously, you can reverse the physical and magical items here later in the game. Let's say we're up against a physical damage dealer. I want to get Berserker Shield. I'm getting Berserker Shield for a couple of different reasons. 1, it has base attack speed. 2, if I get low, I get additional attack speed. So I get another 20%. Your total effective attack speed on this item, especially if you're low, is 35%. That means with Ninja Tabby plus this, you're at almost 60, or you're at 60% increased basic attack speed, which means you are walloping on whoever's in lane with you. And this Death Toll is proccing over and over and over again, keeping you healthy along with your 1, which is also healing you. So this Berserker Shield allows you basically to play directly into whoever's in lane with you if it's a physical damage dealer. And it also gives you 10% physical penetration. So if they've elected to do something like a breastplate, if it's a shock or a guan, this is going to cut through their defenses a little bit. Not a ton, but enough that you're going to have a pretty overwhelming presence in lane. So again, we're applying our passive pretty quickly. We are doing more damage the lower we get in HP, which is proccing the Death Toll and keeping us alive. We've got power on this. 40 physical power is nothing to sneeze at. That's the same amount as like a Jotun's Wrath. This is a great item here. Next up, we're going to be looking at, you can go 2 routes with this. You can, if you're rotating into the mid lane, I would say get your magical defense here because it's going to allow you to W key at whoever's in the mid lane and not really worry about their damage. If you look at how much gold that you need to get to this point in the game, by this point, the mage in the mid lane is not going to have any percent pen, and they may only have like 10 or 15 flat pen by the time you finish whatever this item is here. So your natural protections is probably okay at this point. You can see you get 78 and 48 at level 20. This goes down, obviously. So let's say it's like level 12. You're going to have 41 protections naturally against whoever's in the mid lane. So if I buy a Talisman of Energy for only 2,100 gold, I have 60 magical protections, and now all of a sudden, that mid-mage doesn't really do much to me. The reason we're buying this Talisman of Energy is really simple. Getting a killer assist on enemies causes you and allies within 70 units to gain stacks of energy. This provides 2% movement speed, 2% attack speed, and 10 MP5 per stack. Lasts up to 10 seconds, stacks 6 times. So if we do the math on this real quick, 12% movement speed, 12% attack speed. So you're getting, again, that additional attack speed. We're up to 72% attack speed just with 3 items into the build. It means that we are absolutely slapping the hell out of anybody who's in lane against us, not in lane against us. It's also got 300 health. I think this is kind of an understated part of builds, especially for tanks. is even though I'm up against a physical damage dealer in lane like an Osiris, this health is still effective against him, even though it has magical protections on it. It takes him more to kill me than if I, got like a Shogun's here, right? I'll be harder to kill with a Talisman of Energy than if I had a Shogun's. This is also a pretty cheap item, and it's going to give me movement speed, which also synergizes with the rest of my kit, which I'm going to need to use to run people down. This is great when you're sieging towers, you're fighting in lane, a little less so when you're fighting in the jungle because it takes a little bit to proc this. But this is just a great item overall. Next up, we've got our lockdown item, and most of you could probably guess what this is. It's Frostbound Hammer. Okay, so remember, health is good no matter what because it protects against both types of damage doing damage to you. We've got a decent amount of prots at this point in the game, and everything of ours is pretty cheap. At this point, the ADCs will probably be coming online with their pen, right, which is going to start cutting through your physical protections. But remember, we have the damage mitigation in our 2, which is going to reduce 15% of their damage. Your 2 is the first thing that you level up at, level 1 through 7 or 9, I think it is, right? So it'll already be maxed out at this point. So we could say, okay, now we're going to do something that's going to let us run down targets. You can go a Frostbound Hammer here. If you're ahead, I would go the Frostbound. If you're behind, I probably wouldn't pick this. I might opt for something more like a Spirit Robe or something else that's going to help you survive. But at this point in your build is really when you're looking at what do I need to bring to the team fight, right? Do they have a really immobile front line? If they have somebody like Ymir or Sylvanas or somebody who really doesn't move well, this Frostbound Hammer is worth its weight in gold. You don't even have to be diving the backline. If you just slap the hell out of their Sylvanas with a Frostbound Hammer, lock him down and get your passive on him, he's not going to be able to move anywhere, and you can kill him pretty easily. If you're behind, I'd go into something like a Spirit Robe. 1, because you have the passive where you're going to get an extra 15% damage mitigation on top of the passive from your 2, right? So we're at like, what, 30% mits just with a Spirit Robe proc and your 2 activated, which is going to make you super tanky out of the gate. But that, again, that's only if you're behind. All right, and then the last item, you can kind of go anything here. I've seen people that are super far ahead get things like Kins. I've seen people that are behind will get a Spirit Robe here if they fell behind after they got their Frostbound Hammer. This is kind of your last flex item, and you're going to say to yourself here, what is killing me? What is doing all of this damage to me that I now need to mitigate? And honestly, pressing the T screen or the Y screen after you die to figure out what damage was what brought you down is the best thing that you can do throughout the game when you're in the soul lane, because it's going to give you a clear picture of what's doing damage to you. If their ADC stinks, maybe I don't need all this physical protection. If their mage is the one popping off and every time I go in on them, they blow me up, maybe I could get some magical protection. I'll get a Genji's or an Oni Hunter's Garb and I'll get even more mitigation. Their ADC has crit. I'm going to stuff a Spectral here. But for the most part, a good balanced approach to this is Mantle of Discord. Nothing wrong with a Mantle. It's a great item. You don't get any attack speed value out of it, but between these 3 items, you should be okay with the Death's Embrace. But Mantle is prots, it's cooldown, it's a great escape when the stun procs, especially if you're diving. And just building that, you're gonna have a good amount of protections, a good amount of health, and you're gonna be swinging and doing a lot of damage and running people down. As far as trading things out for boots goes, this is really a judgment call. If you want to chuck a Shogun's in there, by all means, go ahead. If you want to throw some more damage in there, go ahead. CAD Shield, I think, is super underrated on Ama. You could chuck that in there for Ninja Tabby. But really, it's going to be, what do I need? Am I getting the heals off effectively from my 1? If they are, maybe I get a CAD Shield here so I get more health, so I can dive even more with just hitting that 1 over and over and over again, right? And keeping myself healthy. Between that and Death's Embrace, maybe you don't die nearly as much. The ADC now is coming online, and he wasn't before. I could pick up something here like Witchblade. It's all about, what do I need next? That's a common theme you're going to see with these videos is, what do I need next based on the situation that's around me? And it's not necessarily having a standard build in mind that's important. It's understanding what the objective of you as the solo laner is in these team fights, and then building yourself accordingly for it. If you have heavy dive, like you've got a Hunbat's jungle and a Serket support, you don't really need to be in their backline. Maybe you could sit back and you can, blow up their tank or make it so that your carries do more damage. So I'm going to go for something that's going to lock down their tanks when they engage on us. I'm going to go for something that's going to make it hard for the tanks to do damage to my carries. You don't always have to be the one diving if you're playing the solo lane. It's a little bit easier, but pay attention to what your team needs more than anything else. Which character do you need to shut down? What type of damage are they doing? And what's killing you? Once you analyze all three of those things, you should split the responsibilities between you and your jungler, right? If you're really good at taking down the mage because they're immobile and you have a frostbound hammer, and they're really good at taking down the ADC, you guys should split those responsibilities and make sure one of you is diving the appropriate person, creating space, and then build yourself accordingly. So this is just a mock build. Obviously, this is going to change. Somebody's got a different build or a better build or a different way of doing things. Oh yeah, I forgot. Yes. And then you finish the build with Death's Embrace. Lots of prots, lots of health, lots of attack speed, and lots of healing. Make a point of saying to yourself, what is beating my ass in these team fights? Am I ahead? Am I behind? And what should I build when I'm in those different scenarios? If you're behind, Mantle of Discord is an expensive item, right? What's almost as good as Mantle, but not quite? Spirit Robe, right? If I am behind, do I really want to buy a Frostbound Hammer? Maybe I go Spirit and then Mantle to make myself even more tanky. Don't just favor prots either. You also need a little bit of health in your builds, whether you're playing support or solo. Anyway, guys, that's it for solo lane. Real quick, real easy, just to give you an example of the things that you should be thinking about. But remember, when you guys are building for tanks, the other thing you need to do is look at the T screen, or the tab screen, excuse me. Look at the tab screen and see how much penetration people are building. Do I really need to load up on prots if the enemy ADC doesn't have any, or doesn't have any pen? Probably not. Same thing with the mid mage. A talisman is probably all you need if the mid mage is only rocking flat pen, right? So instead of this Mantle of Discord, I could buy a Spectral, I could buy an Emperor's, I don't know, whatever you want, Emperor's Armor, CAD Shield, because I know that this Talisman of Energy, unless that mid-mage gets an Ob Shard, he's not going to do any damage to me. So pay attention to what people are building when they're building it, and then ask yourself, who is kicking my ass? Thanks again for watching. Oh, shit, you're right. Relics and skills. Rule, put this in later. All right, guys, the last thing that we're going to be talking about today is your relics. And again, this goes back to everything I've been saying this entire time. What are you building to stop or do? And the important part here is, what is your role in these team fights? If you are to get into the back line and disrupt the enemy carries and chase them out of the fight and do damage to them, what is going to help you achieve that goal? So first up, and on most solo laners, I mean most, and the only one I can think of that doesn't utilize this is Guan Yu, because he can just zoom into the backline. The first item I'm getting is Blink. This has value all game. You sneak up on people, you blink on them, you blow them up. You could blink on your enemy lane opponent. I personally am not a fan of teleport first relic, because the lane is so long, you're gonna have to walk it back anyway. It's not that big a deal to miss waves anymore. You know, it's not, well, it's a big deal, but it's not a huge deal anymore. You could get yourself back into the farm pretty quickly. There's a lot of safe farm on your side of the map that you can eat up to compensate if you do die and you do miss a wave. I don't think teleport is valuable at all, especially if you're a character like Amaterasu who has movement speed in her kit that is going to make you rotate even faster. I love the blink. If your job is to get into the back line, buy the blink, because this is going to allow you to save your dash to get yourself out, or use the silence to shut down somebody who's damaging you. The second relic is really where you get a lot more options. Personally, I am a big fan of Cursed Ankh. I'm a big fan of Horrific Emblem, and I'm a big fan of Frenzy. Frenzy is more of a support style relic, because you want to dump that on objectives and things like that. You should probably have this on your support, but you can buy it in the solo lane too if you really want to. It's not that big of a deal. You know, if you frenzy your whole team before you blink in, whatever. But for the most part, you're going to want to be buying something that's going to help you do your job. If your job is to blink into the backline and blow up a carry, something like Heavenly is not going to be able to do that for you, right? Something like Phantom or Bracer, I don't know, any of these other options, even Shell probably helps you a little bit, but realistically, you want something that's going to have a lasting impact on the team fight around you. And my personal favorite is either Ankh or Horrific, for two reasons, and it is their upgrade pass. Cursed Ankh, anybody who heals with abilities, somebody like a Danza bro, if Danza throws his 2 while he's Cursed Ankhed, he takes 20% more damage from you, from everybody else. The second thing is I like the Horrific Emblem upgrade. And the reason for this is it reduces their attack speed by 25% and their damage dealt, the overall damage dealt, is reduced by 15%. That's a huge amount of damage reduced. If they were going to do 500 damage to you, it reduces it by 75, right? That's a lot of damage that just comes out. Then you add on top of that the mitigations from your kit. Then you add on top of that the amount of protections that you have and how much that's going to also further reduce their damage. If they're an auto attack based character, like if your job is to go after the ADC, their attack speed has come down, so they're outputting less damage per second. That damage per second that they're dealing is reduced, and then you have mitigations and protections on top of that that are keeping you safe. This is a great item. My two go-tos right now are Ankh and Horrific Emblem, and I only really pick up the Ankh if I am against a team that has a bunch of healing. There are obviously exceptions to this. This may change tomorrow. You can always pick up a teleport. Doesn't matter that much. It'll help you rotate to the other side of the map quickly and get to places that you're not. You know, again, you have to ask yourself, like the rest of this video, what is the most important thing for me to do? If it is to make sure that everybody in the backline dies, or make sure that their team can't heal, or make sure that these carries get chased out, what's the best way to do that? With just this Horrific Emblem, you could get beads out of every single one of their carries that can't run away, especially if they don't have leaps. So just think to yourself, what's the plan? I'm going to blink in, I'm going to Horrific them, and I'm going to run them down. Blink upgrade gives you 10% damage mitigation. Now we're stacking things even further. I got 15% from Amaterasu. I got 15% from Spirit Robe because I'm inevitably going to get knocked up or something when I dive. And then I've got 10% damage mitigation on the blink for 2 seconds. It's not very long, but if you think about that, it all starts to add up and you start to take less damage. So if I blink and Horrific and I have my 2 activated, I'm going to reduce almost all of the damage that's coming my way. So think about what's important for you as a soul laner as you dive in. Trim that, put it in.